She didn't just fine me. She didn't just threaten me. She burned my house to the ground. And the HOA Karen who swore she'd ruin my life, thought she got away with it. No witnesses. No proof. No consequences. Months later, I'm sitting in a courtroom, doing my job, when I hear her name. I look up. And there she is. The same woman who destroyed everything I owned, now standing in front of me, waiting for sentencing. She doesn't recognize me yet. But in a few seconds, she's about to realize karma didn't forget her. Fire. I didn't move into that neighborhood because it was fancy. I moved there because it was quiet. I had spent years in noisy apartments. Thin walls. Loud neighbors. Parking fights. Constant stress. This place felt different the moment I drove in. Tree-lined streets. Clean sidewalks. Houses that looked lived in, not staged. People walking dogs in the evening. Kids riding bikes without parents hovering. There was an HOA, yes. But that didn't scare me. The realtor said the same thing they all say. It's a light HOA. Mostly just keeps things neat. I believed her. I read the rules. No crazy restrictions. No daily inspections. Just basic stuff. Trash cans in by evening. No broken cars in driveways. Lawn maintained. Normal. I bought the house in early spring. A modest place. Wood siding. 2 bedrooms. A small porch that caught the morning sun. The first few weeks were perfect. Neighbors waved. Someone brought cookies. Another neighbor helped me move a couch. No letters. No emails. No problems. Then one afternoon, as I was unloading groceries, I heard a sharp voice behind me. You can't park there. I turned around. She was standing at the edge of my driveway. Straight back. Perfect hair. Clipboard tucked under her arm like it was glued there. I thought she was joking. I'm just unloading, I said. She didn't smile. I'm with the HOA, she said. And that position blocks sidewalk visibility. It didn't. But I moved the car anyway. She watched me do it. Didn't say thank you. Didn't introduce herself. She just wrote something down and walked away. That was the first sign. I just didn't know it yet. A week later, I got my first letter. A formal notice. Typed. Stamped. It said my trash can had been visible from the street past the approved time window. By 12 minutes. I laughed when I read it. 12 minutes. I shrugged it off. Put the letter in a drawer. Moved on. 3 days later, another letter came. This time about my grass. Apparently, the grass near my back fence was inconsistent with community standards. I measured it. It was fine. Still, I cut it. Then another letter came. My porch light color was non-compliant. Warm white instead of cool white. I changed the bulb. Each letter ended the same way. Failure to comply may result in fines or further action. That phrase started living in my head. I still wasn't angry. Just annoyed. I assumed everyone got these letters sometimes. Until I started talking to neighbors. Casually. Carefully. Hey, do you guys get HOA notices often? They looked confused. No, one said. Not really. Another laughed. Maybe once a year. I was getting them weekly. Then the fines started. The first one was $50. For a violation that had already been corrected. I appealed it. I included photos. Timestamps. Receipts. A week later, my appeal was denied. No explanation. Just a sentence. Violation confirmed. That was when I requested a meeting. She was there. Same clipboard. Same posture. She spoke to me like I was a child. You need to understand, she said, these rules exist for a reason. I asked her what reason justified fines for issues already fixed. She smiled. Not a friendly smile. A tight one. That's not something I'm required to explain. That sentence changed everything. Because it wasn't about rules anymore. It was about control. After that, things escalated. Inspections started happening without notice. I'd come home and find little colored stickers on my fence posts. Measurements taken. Photos snapped. Once, I found someone in my backyard. I asked what they were doing. They said, HOA business. No warning. No apology. Just business. I started documenting everything. Dates. Times. Names. I sent emails. Professional. Polite. They went unanswered. Instead, I'd get another letter. Another fine. Another threat of further action. At the next HOA meeting, I finally spoke up. I stood at the podium. Hands shaking, but voice steady. I laid out everything. The letters. The fines. The inspections. Before I could finish, she interrupted me. Let's stay professional, she said. You're getting emotional. The room went quiet. I wasn't emotional. I was frustrated. But that label stuck. After the meeting, no one approached me. People avoided eye contact. Later, a neighbor quietly told me, she's been doing this for years. You don't fight her. I asked why. He shrugged. Because she always wins. The intimidation became subtle. My trash can would get knocked over. Packages would disappear. My sprinkler system was mysteriously damaged. Every time something went wrong, a notice followed. It felt coordinated. One evening, I noticed the smell of gasoline near my driveway. Just faint. I assumed someone spilled fuel. I didn't think much of it. Looking back, I should have. One afternoon, she stopped me as I was getting the mail. She leaned in slightly and lowered her voice. This neighborhood has standards, she said. People who don't fit those standards usually move on. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I started sleeping poorly. Every sound outside made me look up. I double-checked locks. Closed blinds. The house didn't feel safe anymore. And the strangest part? The HOA suddenly went silent. No letters. No fines. No inspections. 3 weeks of nothing. That silence was louder than anything before it. Because people like her don't stop. They wait. And I had no idea how far she was willing to go. After the HOA went quiet, I tried to convince myself things were finally over. No letters in the mailbox. No warning tags on my fence. No strange people walking around my yard with clipboards. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. But the silence felt wrong. It didn't feel like peace. It felt like someone holding their breath. I stayed alert anyway. I kept my phone charged. I checked my doors twice before bed. I left the porch light on all night. Small habits you pick up when you don't feel safe in your own home. A week passed. Then, another. Still nothing. I started to relax. That was my mistake. One night, just after midnight, I woke up coughing. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then I smelled it. Smoke. Not the light smell of burned food. Not a neighbor's fireplace. This was thick. Sharp. Heavy. It burned my throat. I jumped out of bed and opened the bedroom door. The hallway was already cloudy. The smoke alarm went off a second later. That high-pitched scream fills your head and doesn't let go. I didn't grab anything. No clothes. No documents. No memories. I ran. Bare feet on the floor. Phone in my hand. When I opened the front door, heat rushed in like a wall. Flames were already climbing the side of the house. I stumbled down the steps and fell onto the lawn. Someone across the street was shouting. Another neighbor called 911. I stood there shaking, watching everything I owned disappear. The fire trucks arrived fast, but not fast enough. The roof collapsed inward with a sound I'll never forget. It wasn't loud. It was final. Someone put a blanket around my shoulders. I don't remember who. I remember thinking one thing, over and over. This wasn't an accident. The fire marshal talked to me while the flames were still burning. He asked about candles, wiring, appliances. I answered everything honestly. I didn't own candles. The wiring was new. Nothing was running. He nodded slowly. A few days later, he called me. They had found traces of accelerant near the back door. The fire was intentional. Arson. That word didn't feel real at first. It felt like it belonged to someone else's life. Not mine. The insurance company covered some of the damage. Not all. I moved into a small rental across town. Different neighborhood. No HOA. I told myself I was done with that chapter. But the investigation continued. Quietly. Weeks later, a detective asked me about the HOA. I told him everything. The letters. The fines. The threats. I showed him my documentation. He didn't look surprised. Then he told me something I didn't expect. I wasn't the first. Other residents had filed complaints. Not about fires. About harassment. Mailboxes vandalized. Tires slashed. Property damaged. Nothing serious enough to make headlines. Just enough to scare people into compliance. Every report mentioned the same name. The HOA secretary. The woman with the clipboard. They pulled security footage from nearby streets. Most cameras didn't catch anything useful. But one did. A car drove slowly past my house around 2 a.m. Same color. Same model. Registered to her. They checked gas station footage. She had purchased fuel earlier that night. When questioned, she said it was for her lawn equipment. Her lawn mower was electric. She said she was asleep at home. Her phone records placed her near my street. The case moved forward. Carefully. I didn't attend the trial. I couldn't sit in the same room as her. I submitted my statements and stayed away. She was found guilty. Arson. Harassment. Abuse of authority. I thought that would be the end. I moved on with my life. Or tried to. But some nights, I still woke up smelling smoke. And I had no idea that years later, that story would come back to me, in the last place I ever expected. After the fire, I did what people always say they're going to do. I started over. Not in a dramatic way. No big announcements. No social media posts. I just packed what little I had left and moved on. I left that city. Left that neighborhood. Left everything tied to the HOA behind. I found a rental in a quieter town. No board. No rules about paint colors or grass height. Just a lease and a lock on the door. For the first few months, I barely slept. Every smell made me sit up. Every sound outside made my heart race. I replaced smoke detectors obsessively. Checked exits. Kept shoes by the bed. Trauma doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly. But life kept moving. I returned to work. Rebuilt routines. Met new people who didn't know my story. And slowly, the fire stopped being the first thing I thought about every morning. Years passed. During that time, I leaned harder into my career. I had always believed in structure. In rules that protected people instead of controlling them. That belief deepened after what I'd been through. I wanted to be on the side of fairness. Not power. Not intimidation. So when the opportunity came to move into the judiciary, I took it seriously. I studied. I trained. I waited. I didn't rush. By the time I took the bench, the fire felt like a previous life. Still painful. But distant. Or so I thought. One ordinary morning, I was reviewing the day's docket. Just names. Case numbers. Charges. Routine. Then I saw it. Her name. At first, it didn't register. Common enough first name. Familiar last name. But something about it made me pause. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Same spelling. Same middle initial. My chest tightened. I told myself it was coincidence. It had to be. But when I opened the case file, there was no denying it. Arson. Harassment. Abuse of authority. Sentencing phase. It was her. The woman who burned my house to the ground. For a moment, I just sat there. Hands resting on the desk. Breathing slow. Judges aren't supposed to react. But I'm human. I immediately disclosed the connection. Filed the paperwork. Alerted the ethics board. Everything by the book. I expected to be removed from the case. That would have been understandable. But after review, the decision came back. The conviction had already happened. A different judge. Different venue. I wasn't the complainant in this phase. The state was. And legally, I could preside over sentencing. I didn't feel relieved. I felt the weight of it. Because this wasn't about closure for me. This was about justice for the system. The night before sentencing, I didn't sleep. Not from fear. From reflection. I thought about power. About how easily rules can be twisted. About how someone with a clipboard and confidence can destroy lives. I promised myself one thing. No matter what, I would not let emotion guide me. Only the law. The morning of sentencing, I walked into the courtroom like any other day. Robe on. Notes ready. When she was brought in, I didn't look at her immediately. I heard the shuffle of feet. The quiet tension that always fills a room before someone realizes what's happening. Then I looked up. She looked smaller. Older. No perfect posture. No clipboard. Her hair was pulled back tight, but not neatly. Her eyes scanned the room. Then they found me. Recognition didn't hit her right away. It crept in slowly. Confusion. Then shock. Her mouth opened slightly. Then closed. Color drained from her face. She knew. I watched her sit down. Hands shaking. I kept my expression neutral. The courtroom didn't know our history. They didn't know why the air felt heavy. They just knew something mattered here. As proceedings began, I felt something unexpected. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Calm. For the first time since the fire, I felt grounded. Because this time, the rules weren't hers to abuse. They were mine to uphold. And they would protect everyone in that room. Including her. When the prosecutor spoke, I listened carefully. Aggravating factors. Prior behavior. Impact on the victim. My name wasn't mentioned. I was just the homeowner. And that was exactly how it should be. When the defense spoke, she didn't look up. They talked about stress. About pressure. About a moment of losing control. I wrote notes. Not judgments. Just facts. Because in that room, facts were all that mattered. When it was time for victim statements, mine was read aloud. I listened to words I had written years ago. About fear. Loss. Starting over. I didn't react. I didn't need to. Because the past wasn't in control anymore. The present was. And justice was about to speak. The courtroom felt different once the victim statements ended. There was a heaviness in the air. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just real. I could feel every person in that room waiting for something to happen. Not a twist. Not a reveal. A decision. I looked at her again. She sat stiff in her chair, hands folded so tightly her knuckles were white. The woman who once stood in my driveway telling me where I could park now wouldn't meet my eyes. Power does that to people. It leaves quietly. Before sentencing, I allowed her to speak. That was her right. She stood slowly. No confidence. No sharp tone. Her voice was softer than I remembered. She talked about stress. About how the HOA expected perfection. About how residents were constantly pushing boundaries. She said she felt overwhelmed. She said she lost control. She never said my name. She never said house. She said incident. I listened without interrupting. Judges don't respond to excuses. We respond to actions. When she finished, the room was silent again. I looked down at my notes. Then I looked back up. And I spoke. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lecture. I spoke the way the law requires, clear, steady, and grounded. I talked about responsibility. About how authority comes with limits. About how rules exist to protect people, not punish them. I said something I had practiced the night before. Power is not permission. I explained how her actions weren't just criminal. They were a betrayal. Of trust. Of community. Of the system she claimed to serve. I referenced the evidence. The accelerant. The surveillance footage. The pattern of harassment. Not emotionally. Precisely. Because precision is what justice demands. Then I moved to sentencing. I outlined the factors. Severity of the crime. Lack of remorse toward the victim. Abuse of authority. Her attorney shifted in his seat. She stared at the floor. I could feel the room leaning in. I handed down the sentence. Prison time. Mandatory restitution. Community service. Ironically, working under supervision. And a permanent prohibition from serving in any HOA leadership or governance role. Not as revenge. As protection. When I finished, she nodded. Once. No outburst. No tears. Just acceptance. The bailiff stepped forward. The sound of handcuffs echoed in the room. That sound stayed with me. Not because it felt good. But because it felt final. As she was led away, she looked up one last time. Our eyes met again. There was something there. Not anger. Not hatred. Understanding. For the first time, she knew she couldn't control the outcome. And that knowledge changed everything. When the courtroom emptied, I stayed seated. Judges often do. We don't rush closure. I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes. I expected to feel relief. Or satisfaction. Or something dramatic. I didn't. I felt quiet. That surprised me. Because revenge is loud. Justice is not. Justice doesn't celebrate. It concludes. I thought about my old house. The way the porch light looked at night. The smell of the maple tree after rain. I thought about standing barefoot on the lawn, watching flames eat through my roof. And I realized something important. This moment wasn't about getting even. It was about balance being restored. The law didn't erase what happened, but it acknowledged it. And sometimes, that's enough. I signed the final paperwork, closed the file, and stood up. The case was over. But the lesson stayed with me. Rules are powerful things. In the wrong hands, they destroy. In the right hands, they protect. That day, the system worked the way it was meant to. Not perfectly, but fairly. And that mattered more than anything else. After the courtroom emptied, I stayed behind. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I just sat in the quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after the storm. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't movie-like. It was real. Because justice isn't loud. Justice doesn't roar. It doesn't cheer. It simply exists. I thought about my old house again. The smell of the maple tree in spring. The way the morning light hit the porch. The sound of leaves falling in the yard. All gone. Rebuilt houses wouldn't bring back memories exactly the same way. But that wasn't the point. The point was that power had limits. Even her. Even the woman who had made my life miserable. Even the woman who burned my home. Even her. The lesson was clear. Karma doesn't have to shout. It doesn't have to strike suddenly. It waits. Silently. And when it's time, it shows up. I thought about the other residents, the ones who had feared her. The neighbors whose mailboxes were vandalized. The ones whose tires had been slashed. The ones who had left quietly, unwilling to fight. They would see this as proof. Proof that rules exist to protect. Not punish. That systems work if they are upheld. Not perfectly. Not immediately. But eventually. I left the courtroom and walked through the hallways slowly. Clerk offices. Empty jury rooms. The echo of my footsteps was calming. Outside, the sun was bright. Ordinary. Perfectly ordinary. I realized something. I had rebuilt more than a house. I had rebuilt my sense of trust. Not in people, exactly. Not in the HOA that failed me. But in the fact that wrongdoing has consequences. That the law, when followed, works. Even if slowly. Even if quietly. I rebuilt my house years later. Same street? No. Different city? Yes. A smaller house. Simpler. But mine. And I planted a tree. Not as a memorial. Not as a symbol of victory. But as a marker of life moving forward. Sometimes, I still smell smoke in my dreams. Or wake to hear a creak on the porch at night. And my heart pounds like it did that night. But then I remind myself. The person who burned my house is no longer free. The system caught her. She paid. Justice doesn't erase pain. It doesn't undo loss. But it restores balance. And that balance is enough. I often think about her now. About what she learned. Not about me. Not about the house. About herself. Power is fleeting. Rules are not. Karma doesn't require witnesses. And control can never replace responsibility. Some days, I sit on my porch. Morning sun on my face. The tree leaves rustling gently. I feel peace. Not because revenge was served. Not because she suffered. Because justice happened. And life, finally, moves forward. That's the story. Not a perfect one. Not a dramatic one. But one real enough to understand. Rules matter. Abuse of power has limits. And sometimes, the quietest form of justice is the loudest lesson of all.